What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So the second round is fully underway now. We've had two games thus far. The New York Rangers defended home ice in game one, beating the Hurricanes, and the Boston Bruins got a shocked everybody off 2 days rest, dominating the Florida Panthers, at least score-wise, 5-1. So we got to adjust our Stanley Cup odds. If you've been following my Instagram or subscribed to this page, you know every week or so I've been updating my Stanley Cup odds based on how much teams are up in series, injuries, did this team advance this week? So we need to update our Stanley Cup odds. I'm going to do it based on percentages, go through each team, tell you what percentage, then at the end show you the M-Bond Cup pie. So without further ado, let's dive into it. Up first, we got the Carolina Hurricanes, who lost in game one. I still have them at 12%. Yes, at this point, they are an underdog to win the series against the New York Rangers. What's the stat? Like 68% of teams that win game one. I don't think it's 68%, but it's definitely like 60-40 the Rangers right now. Carolina most likely needs to win game two. You cannot rely on going down 2-0 and just winning all your home games and then forcing a game seven. You got to get this one tonight. You need to get this one tonight. But I still think that they have a decent chance overall to win the Stanley Cup, because as long as they are still one of the better teams in the entire NHL, and on top of the fact they had the hardest first round matchup for the most part out of like the top five cup contenders. The Rangers are another top five cup contender. So it was never going to be easy against the New York Rangers. Their backs are definitely against the wall, but if they can get past the New York Rangers, I think they would be my pick to make the Stanley Cup final, and they would have a decent chance to win it. Got to stop taking dumb penalties. 2 power plays off the result of just horrible penalties. It wasn't even like penalties like, oh, someone like slashed someone as they were attempting at an empty net. It was just undisciplined as hell. You don't expect that from a Rod Brind'Amour squad. So Carolina, I'm maybe a little bit nervous, but I'm not sweating it out until they lose game two. If they win tonight, they're in the driver's seat. So you can't massively overreact to game one. I don't think that they were massively overplayed by any stretch, but Carolina, they definitely go down. They were previously at like 16, 17%. I got them down to 12%. Edmonton, I have at 18% when looking at it. It's going to be tough against Vancouver Canucks. Don't get me wrong, but I do think they will advance. I think they have an easier matchup than, say, the Dallas Stars or the Carolina Hurricanes, New York Rangers. Thatcher Demko has been announced that he's going to be out until at least game 4, I believe. Frank Saravalli came out with that tonight. And although Shilovs has been playing very good, it's still going to be an uphill battle for him facing off. He goes from facing Forsberg, Roman Josi, Nyquist, O'Reilly, the Draisaitl, McDavid, Bouchard. Like it's different level. It's definitely a different level. So I think when looking at Edmonton, they have the offensive firepower, probably the best offensive team out of anybody in these Stanley Cup playoffs. It's going to come down to Stuart Skinner. Do I fully trust Stuart Skinner? No, but he did look much better in games 3 through 5 in that series against the LA Kings. The first game, especially considering the Oilers are going to be on not on home ice, they're going to be on the road in Vancouver. As long as they can get 1 out of 2 in Vancouver, I'm feeling very good of their chances to advance to the second round. And yeah, even in that Western Conference final, they're going to be probably more well rested if they beat the Vancouver Canucks in 5 or 6 games. I think Colorado, Dallas is going to go very far. So Edmonton sitting at a pretty healthy 18%. Next up, Colorado, I have it 10%. Yes, if you've been following me on any social media for the most part, I think Dallas is going to win the Stanley Cup, but that doesn't go without saying that Colorado is a very, very good team, a very dangerous team that could beat Dallas. Dallas is not, I'm not saying Dallas is some Stanley Cup shoo-in at this point. Colorado's offensive firepower looked so dominant against the Winnipeg Jets that I'm a lot higher on them now than when these playoffs started. I doubted their kind of depth past their top 6, but their top 6 has been even better than I expected it was, as well as also having some solid depth. Jonathan Drouin probably should be returning during this series. So that's only going to add to their very good forward core. Georgiev is a little bit of a question mark, but beyond game 1, he did his job. He didn't extremely impress me in those games, but he definitely did his job there. So although I have them losing to the Dallas Stars, they still have a decent chance of winning the Stanley Cup. I have them at 10%. They have the experience. They have the firepower. It's going to come down to defense and goaltending, but with this team, we've seen them do it before, so I'm definitely not doubting them that much by any stretch. Next up, Vancouver. Already talked about Edmonton. I have Vancouver at 7%. They can stay alive until Thatcher Demko comes back in either game 4 or game 5. Again, they definitely have a chance against the Edmonton Oilers, but I do favor Edmonton by a decent amount in that series. They have the forward depth for sure to contend with any team in the entire Stanley Cup. Past Hughes and Hronik, they definitely need some of their defensemen to potentially step up. I thought Zadorov looked good in that first series. They're still a very good team, but I think given that injury, you do got to bump them down a little bit, so I do have them at 7%. Still, that's what? 1 in 13 chance. They still could win it potentially. I'm not saying they're out of it, but out of the teams, they are probably the lowest out of the 8 that I would go right now. If I had Demko, I'd maybe bump them up a couple percentage points, but I can't have that much faith in the Vancouver Canucks right now, the way with their injuries that they are constructed. Pettersson needs to step up. If Pettersson starts playing good, maybe that can make up for the fact that they don't have Demko over the start of this series. So they're going to need everybody firing on all cylinders against the Edmonton Oilers. And also, just when you look at it historically, usually a team doesn't win a Stanley Cup after missing the playoffs for like 3 to 4 years. You usually get your feet wet, win around like Vancouver is, and then the next year you take that next jump. Not saying Vancouver is some extremely young team, but I just don't really see it happening for the Vancouver Canucks. New York Rangers, 17%. Yes, they are a little bit lower than the Edmonton Oilers, even though they are up 1-0. Just because I think Carolina is going to give them a really good series. I still think this is going to go to Game 7, but they took care of business in that Game 1, played really fundamental hockey, kept Carolina to the outside, converted on their power play. And if their power play is cooking like that, you could say that they might be 21, 22% at this point when looking at most likely, they're obviously more likely to advance out of the first round than, say, the Edmonton Oilers, considering they are up 1-0 with the New York Rangers. Yeah, it's really going to come down to how their special teams, how their 5-on-5 looks. I know that Shesterkin's going to give them very good goaltending. So I think at this point, with the New York Rangers being up 1-0, they are in the top 3 at the bare minimum in terms of cup odds, and they're going to be my second most likely team in this video in terms of winning the Stanley Cup. The Florida Panthers, they lost their first game. I'm going to still have them at 13%. I still think they're going to beat the Boston Bruins. I'm not as confident as I was coming into Game 1. I said Panthers in 5. I'm not sure it's going to go 5 anymore. I still think they are the better team, but when Boston is getting goals from Loray, Carlo, Brazo, and who was the other? The other guy was another like bottom 6 or bottom pair guy. You're going to lose those games. When their depth players step up like that, I think they did challenge Jeremy Swayman. Swayman did play fantastic, but I think the overwhelming nature of Florida's offense is eventually going to catch up to Boston. I think Florida is eventually going to advance in the series. It might go 6 or 7 games compared to the 5 games that I initially thought, but I think Florida is still the better team at the end of the day, the deeper team. So I'm not massively concerned. Bobrovsky didn't even play that bad. There was just some fantastic individual plays by the Boston Bruins in this game. So you got to bump him down before coming into this round. I probably would have had him at 16, 17, maybe 18%. After losing Game 1, I got to bump him down. I can't say that I have the utmost confidence considering at this point they are down, but I still have them at 13%. I still think they're going to win this series. I'm not ready to hit the panic button unless they lose Game 2 or go down 2-1. Then I'd really start panicking. Right now, not going to panic that much. So with the Boston Bruins, I'm going to go with 8%. I know some people again are screaming at me saying they're up 1-0 against the Florida Panthers. This is not the odds to advance to the conference finals. This is the Stanley Cup finals, who I think is going to win the cup. Even though Boston, you could say maybe they have a better chance at this point to advance the next round over the Florida Panthers. I think in the long run, I'm still not that high in this Boston Bruins team. They are relying on Jeremy Swayman to absolutely carry them past the Leafs. And then in this game, in the first game, he was fantastic. They did get 4 goals, but I'm still not that high in the Boston Bruins in terms of going on a deep, deep Stanley Cup playoff run. Don't get me wrong. If they get the 4 guys that scored last game to score every single game, they're going to wipe the goddamn floor with every single team, but I'm not sure that's going to be a regular occurrence throughout the playoffs. They didn't really have that scoring flair that you expect from a legit Stanley Cup contender in that first round against the Toronto Maple Leafs. So although maybe they'd beat the Florida Panthers in the first round, which would be a pretty big upset, I'm still not very bullish on them winning the Stanley Cup with this overall roster construction and overall roster. Next up, actually last up, Dallas Stars. Dallas Stars I have at 15%. Yes, they are still my Stanley Cup pick. I would pick them in every single matchup going forward, but Colorado is no joke in terms of its next round matchup. I think they are better than the Vancouver Canucks, although I think the Carolina Hurricanes are a better team than the Avs. The fact that the Rangers are up 1-0 gives them a better chance to advance right now than the Dallas Stars. So even though they're my Stanley Cup pick, I can admit that they're maybe not the most likely to win right now, but when looking at it, 7-game war against the Vegas Golden Knights, then 2 days later, although it is at home, you're not really traveling. Now they got to play Colorado in Game 1. It is going to be a very, very good series. It's going to be a long series, in my opinion. They're probably going to go 6 or 7 games. I think Dallas gets it done, and I do think that they would win the rest of the way. But again, their overall path, starting in the first round with the Vegas Golden Knights, if they end up winning the Stanley Cup, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this would be one of the best Stanley Cup runs of all time. You beat the Vegas Golden Knights, one of the best 8 seeds of all time. Colorado, 2022 Stanley Cup champion, two top 3 players in the NHL, 3 top 12 players in the entire NHL. So they're going to have to really go through it. Their bodies are going to be tested. I think they have the depth to do it. Maybe if some of their guys get banged up, they have the depth to make up for that. But it's not going to be an easy path. It is not going to be an easy path for the Dallas Stars in terms of the Stanley Cup run. It's never easy. It's never easy in general, but compared to other previous Cup champs, their path is definitely harder. You look at the Colorado Avalanche in 2022, even though that team was an absolute wagon. First round, played the Nashville Predators without Saros. Second round, St. Louis Blues without Jordan Binnington for some of the games. And then the Edmonton Oilers really weren't that good of a team back then. But yeah, Dallas is going to have an absolute war. But here is the overall Cup pie. Edmonton in first, just because I think that they do have a relatively easy first-round matchup without Thatcher Demko. Rangers are up 1-0. Dallas Stars, still my Cup pick, but tough matchup. Florida, I think they still beat Boston. Carolina, if they get past the Rangers, they're still looking very pretty, and they're not dead in the series. Colorado, unfortunate that they have to play the Dallas Stars next round. Boston, 8%. Would have been probably 4 or 5% before the game 1 for them. Then 7% for the Vancouver Canucks, depending on the health of Thatcher Demko. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about these updated Cup odds? Who would you move up? Who would you move down? I'm going to have some content. I'm probably going to be live streaming the reaction for the draft lottery tonight, so come check that out, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.